Today, what we are doing is giving you and us the opportunity to think about the issues of Latino student success in higher education at a moment that our country is engaged in a new census, that we are looking at the issues of higher education against the backdrop of the President's budget proposal, and that we are living in a global economy that is driven by human resources and technical skills. Because at the core of Excelencia's work is the commitment to focus on accelerating Latino student success in higher education and the action.
I'm proud to give you an update on some of the things that we've done here in the House and that are pending soon. The Student Aid and Fiscal Responsibility Act, H.R. 3221, we call it SAFRA, that has passed the House, is now in the Senate. Many Latino students are low income, and the primary barrier to attending higher education is simply an economic one and financial aid. And SAFRA invests $40 billion to increase the maximum Pell Scholarship to help make college more affordable. We need to focus on both access and completion, and of the students that go to college, too many drop out among our Latino students. SAFRA invests $3.5 billion to fund recruitment and retention and student support services. In the budget for 2010, Hispanic serving institutions received a 26% increase in the Hispanic serving institutions program, which is now funded at $117.4 million. And for next year, in the budget that we just was delivered, the President requested an additional 5% increase. And remember, this is the budget that actually cuts a lot of areas, has a freeze on domestic priorities, but there is still 5% increase to $123.3 million for Hispanic serving institutions, showing the importance that the President has placed in this area.
We applaud Excelencia in education for their valuable work these past several years in looking at Hispanic serving institutions and emerging HSIs, and their relentless work to identify ways to serve Latino students more effectively. For the past 5 years, TG has supported the work of more than 150 nonprofit organizations by providing grant funding on a competitive basis to programs that aim to improve access and success to higher education, particularly for low-income and underrepresented populations. We share this mission with many other funders who recognize that educational attainment for a greater percentage of Americans equates to greater prosperity for the nation as a whole.
Since our inception, we have, as an organization, focused on institutions as a means to an end, that end being student success. And our focus on Hispanic-serving institutions, as well as emerging Hispanic-serving institutions, is part of that tradition. At the end of the day, the question we want everyone to be able to answer is, what does it mean to serve?
Here's one of the things we found in previous studies. There is a critical difference between serving and enrolling. And the federal definition is about Hispanic serving institutions, not Hispanic enrolling institutions. And yet the definition of an HSI is predicated completely on enrollment, an enrollment threshold. So for us, how do we push that envelope? That was a question. So when I think of why are we looking at emerging HSIs, because we know it's not enough to have the designation and then assume that you're doing anything differently. Second, we know that there is, as the Latino population is growing, their college going is increasing, that the number of HSIs are going to increase. And so preparing for that and knowing what is coming in through the pipe is going to be important. This question of 25%, HSIs are defined as 25% undergraduate, full-time equivalent Hispanic enrollment, and they have to be degree-granting not-for-profit or public institutions. Why 25%? What are the ranges that we know are the tipping point for organizations to change? What kind of concentration do you need for an institution to change and to pay attention and serve a population? So we were just trying to figure out within this realm. Now, the purpose of this piece is not to challenge or propose changing the definition that we currently have in federal legislation. In fact, it's less about the exact percentage and more about what institutions are doing. And looking at emerging HSIs, Emerging HSIs are in 20 states. They have at least one. The majority that are, again, emerging, they're not HSIs yet. In California, they're 52. In Texas, they're 42, as Sue mentioned earlier. But, it's not just those places where we expect to see Latinos. We have emerging HSIs in Oregon, Utah, Arkansas, Kansas, Indiana. There were some institutions that were on the cusp. And there are others that jump very quickly to get there. And looking at critical mass theory, that seemed like a good range, 15 to 24%, just before they get there. There were 67 institutions that are between 20 and 24%. 67. So already you've got close to 270, and you've got 67 on the cusp of becoming HSIs. And then there were 109 that are between 15 and 19%. Those are those up-and-comers. Some that are going very quickly and others a little bit more slowly. 44% of emerging HSIs are community colleges. 31% are not-for-profit four-year, and 20% are public four-year institutions. There are numerous institutions that are emerging. They're not waiting to hit the 25% to do things differently in serving their students. Now, again, that sounds pretty basic, but when we find HSIs that we've done research with aren't doing anything differently, aren't acknowledging that they have these students because they didn't assertively bring them in, they just happen to be on campus. And then you've got some that are at 10, 12, 13, 18, 20% that have recognized this population and are constructively finding ways to serve them better. We find that to be an important difference. And looking at better ways to serve them, experimenting with what works, and taking what works, if it does, and bringing it to scale or replicating it, that's a real, it sounds basic, but that's such a complex thing often on campuses themselves. And we found that emerging HSIs that were committed and understood what it took to serve these students were doing that. They used data internally. They knew the percentage of the population that was Latinos. They saw where the strengths and needs were, whether it was in remedial education or in math and science. And they were proactively finding the little resources they had to see if they could find ways to improve that.
And I brought with me, I'll stand up to show this.
I recognize it.
I brought this with me. This is our report. You mentioned in here and in your comments about the HSI task force and how widespread it was throughout the college. There were approximately 55 to 60. I think we started with 60 members on the task force. It's a large task force. The president, who I think you used the word intentional in reference to him, it's exactly right. President Stephen Jordan, he has really helped move the college, helped us a great deal in establishing the concepts of this emerging HSI.
Yes, we agree. It's exactly on board with what we're thinking about, and I think that's what's great. That Excelencia has always been doing some incredible things and pushing us in conversations that I think really make a lot of sense. It's about innovation. It's about accountability. Show me your data. Show me your metrics. Don't tell me some great things. And Deborah knows the numbers better than anyone else, so she's going to push you. Show me where you're actually kind of getting it done and making sure that we kind of hold everyone accountable. And then this whole notion of the promising and the best practices. What's working? And Deborah knows very well, she's talked about this as well too, and what's not working, so we can adjust, so that we can be flexible.
Because I have worked most of my life in higher education, and a lot of it focused on Hispanic serving institutions, I felt I had the leeway in a group convened in Texas of Hispanic serving institutions talking about their vision for the future, to entitle my talk then, Lead, Follow, or Get Out of the Way. Because I truly believe that HSIs have an extraordinary opportunity to lead in terms of innovation, in terms of what works, in terms of what can be done on behalf of Latino students. But clearly, as Deborah's paper documents, and as the institutions that are talked about in it reflect, you don't have to wait until you reach 25% in order to start asking yourself what you can do on behalf of Hispanic students.
This is about getting it done for the long haul. And so my reaction is that in addition to thinking through the tactical for this season, This is about this moment in America's future. And the census data is going to be a drumbeat in 2011. We're going to be hearing about it. And what we're going to be hearing is that everything that we knew in 2000 plus. And so the proposition that Excelencia overtly wants you to know is that this is part of an approach that is predicated on the growth of the Latino community is a growth of America's asset, how we engage that asset, and how that asset makes us stronger. That's the conversation.